Hi, Lance here with a quick, no frills, no talking head video on how I paint realistic foam. As seafoam is an integral part of most seascapes, I thought I'd share my tips and techniques with everyone. So let's begin. The first step I always begin with is the block in. In this initial stage, I'm looking to achieve an overall color and shape of the area to be painted. For seafoam, this typically means shaping the area with a smooth transition from front to back. This area of the water and foam is typically shallower in the front than it is in the back, so we can relate this by painting the area from lighter to darker values. Tip number 1, try to create the transition in the natural direction the water would flow. This is also a great time to indicate any secondary lines that we have in our water wash up. As we can tell from our reference, our line kind of cuts across, indicating that there's actually two wash ups in the scene. Phase 2 of the process begins with modeling. In this phase, we're looking to define the area with a little more detail than the transition we just created. Here you'll see I'm looking for shapes amongst shapes. I'm not looking for an exact replica of the reference, more so the areas within the area where some of the sand is showing through the water and foam. There's really no wrong way to go about doing this. You just need to find a brush you're comfortable with, a color mix that's going to represent the wet sand, and just follow loosely the reference photo. Another part of modeling phase is color refinement. Our block in transition is fine in the beginning, but now we want to build up layers of color to provide depth for the area. A lot of painting realism is just acknowledging depth and figuring out the best way to represent it. So tip number 2, create depth for realism. Here's an example of creating depth within our scene. This middle wave is higher than the water on the sand, so we should indicate a shadow line between the two. This will not only help with the shaping of the wave, but also solidly place it within the scene's perspective. It doesn't have to be perfect just yet, it just allows us to connect the pieces of the puzzle. A quick blend with a soft brush to knock down those hard edges we've created, and we've had ourselves a nice smooth transition and ready to move on to the next phase. Detailing, the final phase of all my paintings. This is where I create the actual final look. Depth and texture are key factors. It can be as many or as little as you're willing to do. The only question we need to ask ourselves, how realistic are we shooting for? As not to bore you with the details, yes, pun intended, I'll speed up the video until another tip or point of interest occurs. Tip number 3, glazing. Here you'll see me applying a glaze to the underside of the middle wave. In order to build up the shadow line, I'm using a glaze of the same color and slowly pulling it out. This helps build depth for the middle wave, but it also helps indicate the physical water depth to our wash up. So tip number 3 is glazes equal effortless depth. Let's slow it down so I can explain this part. The leading edge of our foam here is another area that needs emphasis. That is, because it's higher than the sand, we should have somewhat of a shadow line like the middle wave. In order to translate 2D into 3D, building natural highlights and shadows are necessary. Here I'm starting the beginning of that shadow line. In a bit I'll adjust the sand so as to make it more evident. Tip number 4, texture. If I had to give my top 3 aspects that are required for creating a realistic painting, texture would follow closely after depth and perspective. Texture is a crucial element in nature, and we see it in everything. It's a must-have if we're shooting for realism. Tip number 5, highlights. What good are shadows without highlights? It's said we wouldn't even know darkness without the light. In fact, they're complementary to each other just as colors can be. Here, the top of the foam gets them, but everything in the scene should have some kind of highlights. So, tip number 5, shine light on the highlights. Okay, here's a great example of that. As I darken the edge of the sand, watch how the front foam pops off the canvas. And although this wasn't part of the reference, from my experience, I wanted to show the depth of the foam as well as indicate that this sand was wetter than the sand at the bottom right corner. What do you think? Do you think this technique was effective in relating to that wet sand? Let me know in the comment section if you think it was effective. Oh yeah, if you're not subscribed to the channel, I'd love to have you a part of the family. Click that subscribe button while you're down there. Always click the notification bell so you'll be alerted when we release a new video, and likes on the video always help the channel. As we're getting close to the end of our video, let's do a quick recap over our 5 tips. Number 1, follow the natural flow. Number 2, create depth for realism. Number 3, glazes equal effortless depth. Number 4, texture, texture, texture. Number 5, shine the light on highlights. Thank you for watching this video. Hopefully these tips and techniques will help you the next time you venture out to paint your own seascape. If you'd like to see the creation of this piece from start to finish, make sure you click this video.